without further ado, we'll start a bit of an experiment. Mickey, could you please come up? Mikkel Schade, he is an interaction designer, and he is the technologist and physical designer behind the technologies that we will use in our experiment today. Yesterday I asked some of you if you wanted to take part in our experiment, because as many have said before, I myself have quite a hard time with a sort of, do I have some volunteers kind of thing. So Anne-Marie, Thomas Olsson, Anders, Kristina, Lisa Mobrand, and one man, preferably man, Martin. Very welcome up on stage. What we have is a kind of headset that we have, Mickey has redesigned for the purposes of this experiment. We have never tried this before, ever. And so basically what this is it's an EEG sensor. It measures electronical levels in the frontal lobe. And it's based on a chipset that is used in laboratories and all kinds of things. But this particular device is actually an adaptation of a Japanese fun toy that it was actually shown at the conference some years ago, or a year ago in Malmö, where there is usually like fun rabbit ears on top of these. But they're modified for this purpose and the coding is changed, etc. So when you have this on, the electronical data is gathered up in this device, and it's transferred to these robotic servo thingies with light, basically. And then we have some light diffusion technology of the 80s that we'll put on top of this. So it's going to be a bit heavy, and you'll have to be a bit still with your head, I would say. And if you have a hard time with using the technology, you can always ask Mickey or so. Karin Tidbeck, who will say some words on the narrative, has written a narrative together partly with Robert, with some minor influences from me, and Mickey, for that matter. And the narrative will progress in various ways depending on the sort of collective mind state of these 6 participants. Perfect. Then I'll leave the stage and hand it over to you, Robert.
Let's just wait for the last, and then we are... Yes, let's lower the light. Let's lower the light. Can you hear me? Is the voice okay in volume? Yes. Are you ready? Yes. This is your last chance to leave. Then we start. You live in a house by the great forest with your parents and your brother Hansel. Your parents are both unemployed, and life is hard. You have little to eat and certainly no internet or cell phone or vacations. Your clothes are hand-me-downs from distant cousins. One night, when you're lying in the old IKEA bed you share with your brother, you can hear your parents talking through the paper-thin walls. Your father says, "What is to become of us? How are we to feed our poor children when we can barely feed ourselves?" Your mother replies, "I'll tell you what, husband. The children are old enough to survive on their own. Early tomorrow morning we will take them into the deepest reaches of the forest. There we shall light a fire for them and give each of them one more piece of bread, and then we shall leave them." "No, wife," your father says, "I will not do that. How can I bear to leave my children alone in the forest? The wild animals would soon come and tear them to pieces, or they might wander into an irradiated zone." "Oh, you fool," says your mother. "Then we must all 4 die of hunger. You may as well dig 4 graves in the backyard." And your mother goes on arguing with your father until finally he gives in. But I feel very sorry for the poor children all the same, he says. The time to feel hungry and sorry for yourselves has passed. What to do? It is time to act. When your parents have fallen asleep, you get out of your beds and try to open the bedroom door, but it's locked. Hans runs over to the window, even though you both know it was nailed shut long ago to keep burglars out. You both go back to bed and hold each other tight, crying yourselves to sleep. The next morning, your mother wakes you up. Get up, lazy bones, we are going into the forest to look for spare parts. She gives you and your brother a piece of bread each. Here is something to eat for dinner, but do not eat it too soon, for this is all you get. You all set out for the forest together. The trees stand so close together that it's almost dark. Nothing grows on the forest floor but mushrooms that have grown huge and toxic from radiation. Every once in a while, Hansel stops and looks back to remember the way. Finally, your father says, Hansel, why are you falling behind and what are you looking at? Forgive me, father, but I thought I saw a deer. Silly boy, your father replies. There haven't been deer in these parts for years. You are deeper into the forest than you have ever been before. You come to a little clearing and your father says, now, children, pile up some wood and I will light a fire that you may not be cold. You gather brushwood and dead branches into a huge pile as high as a little hill. Your father lights it, and when the flames are burning very high, your mother says, now, children, lay yourself down by the fire and rest. We will go look for scrap metal at an old factory we heard about. When we are done, we will come back and fetch you home. You sit by the fire, and when the sun sinks lower, you eat some of the bread. You fall asleep. The sound of footsteps wake you up. It's dark night. And the fire has gone out, and someone is out there in the darkness. You both cry out with fear. It's only me, your father says. I have come to fetch you home. He takes you by the hand and leads you back through the forest. When you return home, your mother is standing in the kitchen. She stares at the three of you for a moment and then cries, why are you so late? It has been dark for hours. As you lay in bed once more, you can hear your parents arguing. Why did you take them home again? Your mother says. I have told you they are old enough to fend for themselves. My parents did the same when I was little, and so did yours. I couldn't stand the thought of them alone in the darkness, your father replies. Well, the food is almost gone again, says your mother. We have a can of beans left, and that's all. The children must go. We will take them farther into the forest so that they will not find their way out again. It is for their own good and ours. When you think your parents fall asleep, you once again try to sneak outside, but the door is locked. Early in the morning, your parents drive you out of your beds and give you a can of beans to share. On the way into the forest, Hans quietly opens the can and often stops to throw a bean on the ground. Hansel, why on earth are you throwing your beans on the ground, says your mother. I didn't give you food so you could waste it. She digs in his pocket and takes all the beans. You are led even deeper into the forest, where you have never been before. Just like yesterday, you make a great fire and your mother says, just wait here, children, and when you are tired, you may sleep a little. In the evening, we will come and fetch you home. You are afraid of your parents, so you say nothing. You sit down by the fire. I wish we had something to eat, says Hansel, as if he has forgotten that it's all his fault you don't have any beans left. Everything is his fault. You have no food and you won't be able to find your way home. Even though you're angry and frightened, you fall asleep. You do not wake until it's dark night. Hansel says, we shall soon find the way, even though he has no clue. You walk the whole night and all the next day, but cannot find your way out of the forest. You are hungry, for you dare not eat the mushrooms or berries on the ground. Your parents have told you of the horrible things that happen to people who eat irradiated plants. Finally, you are so exhausted that you lie down under a tree and fall fast asleep. It's now 3 mornings since you left your house, and it feels like you are just walking deeper into the forest. If help does not come soon, you will surely die of hunger and thirst. But around midday, you hear cheery music through the trees. Listen, Hans says, someone else is here. You come out of the trees and see a huge sign that says, Summerland. It is an amusement park, but the sign is covered in vines and the ground is overgrown with grass and weeds. The Ferris wheel is still and the roller coaster is falling apart. But look, in the middle of the park is a fairy tale castle, shining in bright colors. And there is a carousel spinning round and round, and a chocolate wheel with prizes still left. The chocolate bars and pralines are white with age, but still tasty, and you eat until you can eat no more. Suddenly, a soft voice whispers through the speaker system. Nibble, nibble, gnaw. Who's nibbling at my prizes? Hansel and Gretel, says Hans, like the idiot he is. No, it's the wind, the heaven-born wind, you shout. You find bottles of soda in the moldy fridge of a soda stand. When you have sated your thirst and hunger, you turn your attention to the attractions. Such wonderful carousel horses and bumper cars that work. Best of all is the fairy tale castle. You hop into a carriage shaped like a flying boat, and it takes you through wonderful sceneries where gnomes and jinn and fairies wave at you from magical landscapes. And there, a scary witch by a house on chicken legs. She smiles at you and steps out of the frame and pushes a big red button. The boat stops, and you realize it's a real person, an old woman. Oh, you dear children, who has brought you here? You look so hungry and cold. Welcome to my house. No harm shall come to you. She takes you by the hand and opens the door at the back of the scenery. On the other side is a big kitchen with an iron stove. Sausages, garlic breads, and herbs hanging from the rafters. And on the kitchen table sits a bowl of real apples. It is so nice to have company, says the old woman. Sit down and let's get some food into you. There is something strange about the woman. She smiles with too many teeth. And she looks at you and Hansel like a wolf looks at a pair of rabbits. Even so, you cannot say no to the food she offers you. You stuff yourselves with spicy sausages, with mashed potatoes, and pancakes with sugar and apples, and fresh bread stuffed with real butter, and finally ginger cookies and hot chocolate with whipped cream on top. When you are so full you can barely move, the old woman shows you to a couple of little beds. The old woman tucks Hans in and he falls asleep. Immediately, when she bends over you, you tell her, I hate him. You can keep him. The old woman grins at you with her yellow teeth. As you drift to sleep, you think about that grin. Who is she really, and what did you just do? You wake up because Hansel is screaming. He is sitting up in bed and the old woman is holding his arm. She turns towards you, sniffing the air as if she can smell that you are awake. Her dim eyes glow bright red. You can see her for what she is, a ravenous beast, a murderer, a witch. She lets out a raspy laugh that makes your blood run cold and says, such morsels, all plump and rosy. I have you now. You will not escape me. The witch pulls Hansel out of bed. You try to get out of bed and follow her, but you can't. It is as if your limbs have turned to stone. You can only watch as the witch drags Hansel outside. You hear Hansel screaming, and then the sound of a heavy door slamming shut. The witch comes back into the kitchen and walks over to your bed. She wheezes and takes you by the neck as if you were a kitten. She slaps you in the face. I have looked your little brother up. Now stop staring and go fetch some water, you lazy cow. Cook something nice. We are going to fatten little Hansel up, and when he is fat, I will eat him. The witch shuffles out of the kitchen and leaves you sitting on the bed. Far away you can hear Hansel calling your name. It is your fault that he is in that cage. It is all your fault, and now the witch is going to eat him. You do as the witch commands. When she says make him dinner, you make him dinner. When she says make him breakfast, you make him breakfast. You cook stews and puddings and pies from the witch's unending supply of food. Hansel reaches for you every time you bring him a meal. He calls your name, Gretel, Gretel, but you don't look him in the eyes. If you just do as you are told, the nightmare will be over soon and all the bad things will go away. Every morning the old hag creeps up to Hansel and cries out, stretch out your finger that I may feel if you will soon be fat. But Hansel stretches out a little chicken bone to her, and the witch is blind enough to think that it is his finger. Every morning she is astonished that there seems to be no way of fattening him. She makes you cook more food. You cook more food. You wake up screaming at night. Sometimes you forget how to breathe and wake up on the floor. When the 4 weeks have passed and he still remains thin, she takes you by the neck again. She looks impatient. You will bring me some water and spices in the morning tomorrow. Fat or lean, tomorrow I will kill him and cook him. You nod, because you are too scared to do anything else. Early in the morning you fetch water and spices. When you come into the kitchen, the witch has already stoked the fire under the baking oven. On the table sits a butcher knife and a club. We will bake first, says the witch. I have already heated the oven and kneaded the dough. The old hag pushes and drags you over to the enormous oven and opens the hatch. The heat is enough to burn your cheeks. Crawl inside and see if it's properly heated so that we can put the bread in. You stare at her. Your brain is working so slowly. What does she want? Silly goose. The door is big enough, says the witch. She gives you a small push, but your legs won't move. Climb in. The door is big enough. Just look, I can get in myself. And she thrusts her head into the oven. You fall to your knees. Please, please, do not make me go into the oven. I can be useful. I will serve you well. The witch gazes down at you with her red eyes for a long, long moment. Very well, she says. If you are a good girl today, then I might spare you. So while she bakes bread, you sweep and scrub the kitchen floor and clean every nook and cranny. You sharpen the knives to a razor's edge and polish the butcher's block. When you open the door to Hans' cage, he greets you with happiness at first, and then he sees the witch over your shoulder. He calls out to you as she drags him into the kitchen. You make yourself cold and stiff as a tree in the forest, until you can't hear him at all. And then the witch clubs him over the head and he stops fighting. You rub his skin with salt and cook him whole, like a piglet. The thing that comes out of the oven is not your brother. You take a bite and the flesh is juicy and tender. You eat until you can eat no more. After dinner, your mistress takes you out into the fairground for a bit of fun. You ride all of the horses in the carousel as your mistress watches. You ride the bumper cars until you have crashed every last one, and your mistress claps her hands. Then you get into one of the little winged boats and ride back into the castle, where you eat and eat until you are so full that you fall asleep at the table. You wake up a little when your mistress carries you to your bed and tucks you in. "You have been such a good girl today, little Gretel," she whispers. "You have been such a good girl, and I shall teach you everything I know." You have become the witch's apprentice, and never again will you be hungry or cold or lonely. You spend the rest of your days helping your mistress take care of those who wander into the fairground. For the first time in your life, you are at peace. The end.